The notification pinged at 2:47 a.m., and that's when my perfect life officially fell apart. I'd been lying awake for 3 hours, staring at the ceiling of our ridiculously overpriced bedroom, listening to Sienna's fake sleeping routine. You know the one, the carefully controlled breathing that's just a little too even, the strategic positioning that screams, "I'm totally unconscious and definitely didn't just sneak back into bed reeking of gin and guilt." My name is Evan Callahan, and until about 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Self-made tech CEO, beautiful wife, house in the hills that looked like something out of a magazine. The American dream wrapped up in a neat little package with a bow on top. What a joke. The phone buzzed again. Another Instagram notification from Sienna's account at 3 in the morning, because that's totally normal behavior for someone who claims to be exhausted from working late at the office. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, keeping one eye on my wife's suspiciously still form. The screen lit up, and there it was, the post that would change everything. A selfie of Sienna at some upscale cocktail bar, looking absolutely stunning in a dress I'd never seen before. Her smile was radiant, the kind of genuine happiness I hadn't seen directed at me in months. But that wasn't what made a chill run down my spine. It was the caption, "Half is mine, but the rest is yours, living my best life, #new beginnings." And there, barely visible in the background of the photo, was the logo of my company. Call Tech Solutions. The business I'd built from nothing, working 18-hour days in a cramped apartment while eating ramen and dreaming of something bigger. The comments were already rolling in. Heart eye emojis from her girlfriends. "Get it, girl," from her sister. And then buried in the mix, a comment that made my stomach drop. "Can't wait to see what's yours," from an account I didn't recognize. At Damian Cross Executive. I clicked on the profile. Damian Cross, Senior VP at Morrison & Associates. The same Morrison & Associates where Sienna worked in HR. The same company she'd been having all those late-night emergency meetings with lately. The photos told the story my wife had been too cowardly to share. Damian at expensive restaurants. Damian on a yacht. Damian in what looked suspiciously like hotel rooms with champagne and rose petals. And in several recent photos, a woman's hand wearing a very familiar wedding ring. My grandmother's ring that I'd spent 3 months' salary on 6 years ago. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through months of evidence. How had I been so blind? The late nights, the new clothes, the way she'd started talking about what she deserved, and fair distribution of assets during our increasingly rare conversations. Half is mine, but the rest is yours. She wasn't talking about sharing. She was talking about taking. I glanced over at Sienna, still maintaining her Oscar-worthy performance of sleep. Her phone was charging on her nightstand, just within reach. We'd always known each other's passwords, or at least I'd never changed mine. Apparently, she'd been more careful about her privacy lately. But here's the thing about being a tech CEO. You learn a few tricks along the way. I'd installed a family tracking app on both our phones 2 years ago after Sienna got lost during a girls' trip to Vegas. She'd agreed it was a good safety measure. What she didn't know was that the app had evolved, and I'd never mentioned the new features, like cloud backup access. I slipped out of bed and padded quietly to my home office. The house was completely silent, except for the hum of my computers and the distant sound of the city below. I settled into my chair and opened my laptop. 20 minutes later, I had everything. Photos, text messages, emails, calendar entries, a complete digital diary of my wife's affair, laid out in chronological order like evidence in a homicide trial. The texts were the worst part, not just because of the explicit content, though there was plenty of that, but because of how they talked about me. "Evan's so clueless," she'd written to Damian just last week. "He actually thinks I'm working late. Poor guy has no idea what's coming." What's coming? Like I was some kind of obstacle to be removed rather than the husband she'd promised to love and honor. I kept reading, my jaw clenching tighter with each message. They had plans. Big plans. Sienna had been taking photos of important documents from my home office. Bank statements, business contracts, property deeds. She'd been building a case for what she called fair compensation for 6 years of supporting his dreams. Supporting my dreams? She'd worked part-time for the first 3 years of our marriage while I was building the company, sure. But I'd paid for everything, her car, her clothes, her expensive yoga classes and weekend spa trips. And for the last 3 years, she'd had her own successful career that she claimed to love. Apparently, love didn't pay as well as betrayal. The final straw was a voice message she'd sent to Damien 2 days ago. I plugged in my headphones and hit play. "Baby, I can't wait much longer," Sienna's voice whispered through the speakers. "Evan's getting suspicious, and I think he might be checking up on me. But don't worry, I've got everything we need to take him for everything he's worth. The business, the house, everything. He built it during our marriage, which means half of it's mine by law. And once we're together, the rest will be yours too, just like I promised." I sat back in my chair staring at the screen. 6 years of marriage. 6 years of building a life together, or so I'd thought. And she'd been planning to destroy it all for some smooth-talking executive with a yacht and a god complex. My phone buzzed. A text from my business partner and COO, Grant Morrison. "Dude, you awake? You need to see Sienna's Instagram. The comments are getting weird." I switched over to Instagram and refreshed Sienna's post. The comment count had tripled in the last hour. Apparently, posting cryptic messages about claiming what's yours at 2 a.m. gets people talking. "Is everything okay with you and Evan?" From her cousin. "Girl, what's this about? Call me!" From her best friend Lila. And then the one that sent a surge of anger through me. "Looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. Time to make it official." From Damien. Tomorrow. They were meeting tomorrow to make something official. I was about to find out exactly what that meant. I didn't sleep. By the time Sienna's alarm went off at 7 a.m., I'd already been through every file on her cloud backup twice and had a plan that would make Sun Tzu proud. She rolled over and smiled at me, the same bright, loving smile that had made me fall for her in college. "Morning, honey. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said, which was the first honest thing either of us had said in months. "Big day at the office." "Oh, me too," she said, stretching like a cat. "Actually, I might be late tonight. We've got this huge project deadline, and Macross, wants the whole team to stay until we get it sorted." Damien. She'd almost slipped and used his first name. I wondered if she realized how sloppy she was getting, or if she just didn't care anymore. "That's fine," I said, getting up and heading for the shower. "I've got some things to take care of anyway." The first thing I took care of was calling my lawyer. Richard Steinberg had handled the incorporation of my business and our house purchase. He was also, conveniently, one of the best divorce attorneys in the state. "Evan, good to hear from you." Richard's voice was warm but professional. "What can I do for you?" "I need to know exactly what my wife is entitled to if we divorce," I said, sitting in my car outside a coffee shop 3 blocks from my house. "And I need to know how to protect my business." There was a pause. "I see. Can you come in this afternoon? We should discuss this in person." "I'll be there at 2. The second thing I took care of was security. I called Jasper Hendricks, a former military guy who'd done some contract work for my company. He ran a private security firm now, the kind that specialized in discrete problem solving. "Jasper, it's Evan Callahan. I need surveillance equipment for my house and office, and I need it installed today. Personal or professional matter?" Jasper's voice was all business. "Personal. Very personal. I'll be there in 2 hours." The third thing I took care of was the most satisfying. I drove to my office and spent an hour with my IT director, making some very specific changes to our network access protocols. Sienna had a company email account that I'd set up for her when we got married, mostly so she could access our shared calendar and home security system. She'd also been using it to back up her phone photos. As of 10 a.m. that morning, that access was revoked, along with her access to our joint bank accounts, our shared credit cards, and the app that controlled her car's remote start and GPS tracking. I was just finishing up when Grant knocked on my office door. "Hey man, you okay? You look like you haven't slept." Grant Morrison was my oldest friend, and the only person I trusted completely with the business. We'd been roommates in college, and he'd been the first person I'd called when I had the idea for call tech. He was also brutally honest, which I needed right now. "Sienna's having an affair," I said without preamble, "with some guy from her company, and they're planning to take me for everything I'm worth." Grant's face went through several expressions before settling on grim determination. "What do you need?" I handed him a flash drive. "Everything's on there, photos, messages, emails, the works. I need you to back it up in 3 different locations and make sure our legal team has copies." He pocketed the drive without looking at it. "What's the play?" "First, we protect the business. Then we protect everything else, and then..." I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Then we let them make the first move. My phone rang. Sienna. Hi, baby. Her voice was honey-sweet. I just tried to use my card at lunch and it got declined. Is there something wrong with our account? I don't know, I lied smoothly. Maybe you should call the bank. I did. They said the account access had been changed. Do you know anything about that? Nope, that's weird. Maybe it's a security thing. You know how paranoid banks are these days? There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice had an edge to it. Evan, is everything okay? You've been acting strange lately. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just stressed about work. You know how it is. Okay, well, I'll figure out the card thing. I love you. Love you too. I hung up and immediately called the bank to report suspicious activity on our joint accounts. It's amazing how quickly they can freeze everything when there's a potential security breach. At 2 p.m. sharp, I was sitting in Richard Steinberg's office, learning exactly how screwed I wasn't. The good news is that your business is protected, Richard said, reviewing the documents I'd brought. You incorporated before you got married, and you've never added Sienna as a partner or shareholder. She has no legal claim to Calltech Solutions. And the bad news? The house is joint property, and she's entitled to half its value. Same with any assets you've acquired during the marriage. But given what you've shown me here, he tapped the folder of evidence, I think we can make a case for fraud. If she's been planning to deceive you about the nature of your relationship in order to maximize her settlement, that changes things. What kind of changes? Richard smiled. It was the smile of a shark who'd just smelled blood in the water. The kind where she gets nothing. I left the lawyer's office feeling better than I had in months. The house was worth about $2 million, but I'd put down 60% from the sale of my previous property I'd owned before the marriage. The cars were in my name. The investments were mostly mine. Sienna had been so confident about her half of everything that she'd never bothered to check what everything actually was. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasper. Equipment installed. You've got eyes and ears on everything now. Good hunting. I drove home to find Sienna's car in the driveway. She was supposed to be at work for another 3 hours. I parked and walked into the house, calling out, Honey, you're home early. Evan? Her voice came from upstairs. Can you come up here? We need to talk. I found her in our bedroom, sitting on the bed with her laptop open and papers spread around her. Financial documents, property deeds, business incorporation papers. Where did you get those? I asked, though I already knew the answer. From your office. Evan, we need to discuss our financial situation. Our financial situation? She stood up, and for the first time since I'd known her, Sienna looked dangerous. I know about the bank accounts. I know you've been hiding money from me. And I know you think you can just cut me out of the life we built together. The life we built together? I couldn't help but laugh. Sienna, what exactly did you build? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been pretty busy building something else entirely. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know about Damien. The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because I've got about 6 months of text messages that say otherwise, along with photos, emails, and some very interesting voice messages about taking me for everything I'm worth. She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched her calculate her options. Finally, she smiled, and it was like looking at a stranger. Prove it. Prove it? I pulled out my phone and opened the voice message app. Okay. Sienna's own voice filled the room. Baby, I can't wait much longer. Evan's getting suspicious, and I think he might be checking up on me, but don't worry, I've got everything we need to take him for everything he's worth. I watched her face crumble as her own words played back to her. When the message ended, the silence stretched between us like a chasm. How long have you known? She asked finally. Long enough. The question is, how long has this been going on? She sat back down on the bed, suddenly looking smaller. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been screwing your boss and planning to divorce me so you can take half of everything I've worked for. Did I miss anything? You don't understand. You're never here, Evan. You're always working, always focusing on the business. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you looked at me like you actually saw me? So this is my fault? It's both our faults. We've been growing apart for years, and you know it. Damien makes me feel alive again. He makes me feel like I matter. And the money, does that make you feel alive too? Her jaw tightened. I deserve half of what we built together. I supported you when you were nobody. I believed in you when no one else would. I earned my share. You earned your share? I stood up, pacing to the window. Sienna, you worked part-time at a boutique for 3 years while I was building the company. I paid your student loans. I bought your car. I paid for this house. What exactly did you contribute besides moral support? I contributed 6 years of my life. And I contributed 6 years of mine, plus about 120 hours a week of actual work. She stood up too, her face flushed with anger. Fine. You want to do this the hard way? We'll do it the hard way. I'm calling my lawyer. Go ahead, I already called mine. That stopped her cold. What? Did you really think I was going to just roll over and let you and your boyfriend take everything I've worked for? Sienna, I built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. You think I don't know how to protect what's mine? Half of it is mine too. Actually, none of it is. I incorporated before we got married. You're not a partner, not a shareholder, not even an employee. You have exactly zero legal claim to my business. The look on her face was priceless. Pure shock mixed with growing panic. The house is mostly mine too. Check the down payment records. The car's in my name. The investments, mine. She stared at me, and I could see her mentally tallying up what she'd thought she was entitled to versus what she might actually get. You bastard, she whispered. No, Sienna, I'm just not stupid. My phone rang. Grant. Sorry to interrupt, he said when I answered, but we've got a situation. Someone tried to access our server remotely about an hour ago. Used credentials that were revoked this morning. I looked at Sienna, who was trying very hard to look innocent. What kind of access? Financial records, client lists, proprietary code. Whoever it was knew exactly what they were looking for. Can you trace it? Already did. IP address traces back to Morrison and Associates. Sienna's face went white. Handle it, I told Grant. And make sure legal knows about the attempted breach. I hung up and turned back to my wife. Corporate espionage, Sienna? Really? I don't know what you're talking about. You gave Damien your login credentials. He tried to hack my company. That's a felony. You can't prove that. Actually, I can. We log everything. And your boyfriend was stupid enough to use his office computer. I smiled. I wonder what his bosses will think when they find out he was trying to steal from a client's husband. For the first time since this whole conversation started, Sienna looked genuinely scared. Evan, please. We can work this out. We don't have to destroy each other. We? There is no we, Sienna. You destroyed we when you decided to cheat on me and steal from me. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, and now we're both going to have to live with the consequences. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the financial papers scattered across our bed. What happens now? Now you pack a bag and get out of my house. This is my house too. Not anymore. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. And I'm filing a restraining order based on the corporate espionage and the financial fraud. You've got 1 hour to get your personal belongings and leave. You can't do this. Watch me. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. The Evan she'd married had been eager to please, desperate for approval, grateful that someone like her would even look at someone like me. That Evan was gone. I'll fight you, she said. I'll take you for everything. With what money? Your credit cards are canceled, your bank access is frozen, and your boyfriend is about to be unemployed. Good luck finding a lawyer who'll work for free. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then turned back. This isn't over. Yes, it is. After she left, I sat in the empty house and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The war was just beginning, but for the first time, I was fighting back. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Damien Cross. We need to talk. I smiled and typed back, no, we don't. But apparently, we did. Damien Cross turned out to be exactly what I'd expected. Tall, perfectly groomed, expensive suit, the kind of confident smile that said he'd never been told no in his entire privileged life. He was waiting by my car when I left the office the next evening, leaning against a silver Porsche like he was posing for a magazine ad. Evan Callahan, he said as I approached. It wasn't a question. Damien Cross, I replied. You're trespassing. He laughed, a sound that probably charmed boardrooms and cocktail parties. Relax, I just want to talk. About what? How you've been screwing my wife, or how you tried to hack my company? His smile faltered slightly. Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot here. This whole situation is messy, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Really? Enlighten me. Sienna's a remarkable woman. She deserves better than what she's been getting. And what has she been getting? A husband who's married to his work, a man who takes her for granted, someone who doesn't appreciate what he has. I had to admire his balls, if not his intelligence. And you do. I do. I can give her the life she wants, the attention she deserves, the financial security she's earned. Financial security she's earned? I stepped closer to him. Let me guess. You two have been planning this for months. Get her a big divorce settlement, then you both ride off into the sunset with my money. It's not your money, Evan. It's community property. Half of everything you've built belongs to her. Actually, it doesn't. But even if it did, what makes you think I just hand it over? His smile was back, cockier than before. Because if you don't, things are going to get very unpleasant for you. Sienna's prepared to go public with some very damaging allegations about your marriage, about how you've been controlling her, isolating her, threatening her. Threatening her? Domestic misuse is a serious matter. Judges tend to be very sympathetic to victims, especially beautiful, articulate victims who just want to escape their controlling husbands. I stared at him, genuinely impressed by the audacity. So that's the play? If I don't give you what you want, Sienna claims I misused her? It doesn't have to come to that. We're reasonable people. We can work something out. What did you have in mind? 50% of your liquid assets plus the house. Sienna keeps her car, her jewelry, and a reasonable monthly allowance for, say, 5 years. In exchange, the divorce is quick and quiet. No messy allegations, no media attention, no damage to your precious company's reputation. And if I say no, then Sienna tells her story to anyone who'll listen, starting with your business partners and biggest clients. You know how these things go, Evan. Even if the allegations are eventually proven false, the damage to your reputation will be permanent. Is your pride really worth destroying everything you've built? I pretended to consider it, letting the silence stretch between us. Finally, I nodded slowly. You make a compelling argument, I said. There's just one problem. What's that? I recorded this entire conversation. His face went white. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and hit play. His own voice filled the parking garage. Domestic misuse is a serious matter. Judges tend to be very sympathetic to victims. Extortion is a felony, Damien. So is conspiracy to commit fraud. And now I have you on tape, threatening to destroy my reputation with false allegations unless I pay you money. He lunged for my phone, but I was ready for him. I stepped back and let him stumble forward, off balance. Easy there, champ. Wouldn't want to add a tack to your growing list of charges. You son of a witch. Actually, my mother's a saint, unlike your girlfriend. He straightened his tie, trying to regain his composure. This isn't over. You know, that's exactly what Sienna said. You two really are perfect for each other. You have no idea who you're messing with. Sure I do. I'm messing with a mid-level corporate executive who thinks he's a master manipulator, but is actually just a common criminal. And his girlfriend, who's about to find out that adultery and extortion don't pay as well as she thought they would. I got in my car and rolled down the window. Oh, and Damien, you might want to update your resume. I had a very interesting conversation with your CEO this afternoon. Apparently, Morrison & Associates takes a dim view of employees who use company resources to commit corporate espionage. I drove away, leaving him standing in the parking garage, looking like a man who'd just realized he'd shown up completely unprepared for the battle. But I wasn't done with either of them yet. 3 days later, Sienna made her move. I was having coffee and reading the news when Grant called, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Turn on Channel 7, now! I grabbed the remote and flipped to the local morning show. There was Sienna, looking beautiful and vulnerable, in a simple blue dress, sitting across from Rebecca Martinez, the city's most aggressive investigative reporter. I never thought I'd be sitting here, Sienna was saying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, but I can't stay silent anymore. Women need to know they're not alone. Tell us about your marriage, Rebecca prompted, leaning forward with predatory interest. From the outside, it looked perfect. Successful husband, beautiful home, everything money could buy. But behind closed doors, Sienna's voice broke convincingly. Evan was controlling, manipulative. He monitored my every move, controlled our finances, isolated me from my friends and family. My phone started ringing. Reporters, business associates, clients. I let them all go to voicemail. When did the physical misuse start? Rebecca asked. Physical misuse. There it was. About 2 years ago, it started small, grabbing my arm too hard, pushing me during arguments. But it escalated. Last week, he threatened to end me if I tried to leave him. I had to admire her performance. The tears looked real. Her voice had exactly the right tremor of fear and pain. If I didn't know better, I'd believe her myself. What made you decide to come forward? I found out he's been planning to have me ended. He hired private investigators to follow me, installed surveillance equipment in our home without my knowledge. I'm terrified, but I can't live in fear anymore. My phone rang again. Richard Steinberg. Evan, please tell me you're watching this. I'm watching. We need to meet. Now. I'll be there in an hour. I turned off the TV and sat in the silence of my house, whatever Sienna claimed, and felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. She'd just declared war. Time to show her what war actually looked like. An hour later, I was sitting in Richard's office, watching him pace behind his desk like a caged tiger. This is bad, Evan, really bad. Even if we can prove she's lying, the damage to your reputation could be irreversible. Can we prove she's lying? With the surveillance footage from your house, probably. But that'll take time, and time is what we don't have. She's already filed for an emergency restraining order. You can't go home, can't contact her, can't go within 500 feet of her. What about the business? That's protected for now, but if she can make the misuse allegations stick, she might be able to claim emotional damages. That could be worth millions. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. What if I have her admitting that she's lying? What do you mean? I played him the recording I'd made the night before. Sienna's voice filled the office. I can't believe how easy this is. That reporter ate up every word. Evan's going to be destroyed, and there's nothing he can do about it. By the time this is over, he'll give us everything we want just to make it stop. Richard stopped pacing. How did you get this? She called Damien from our house last night. The surveillance system I installed records all phone conversations in common areas. Is that legal? It's my house, and I disclosed the surveillance in our prenup. She signed off on it. This changes everything. We can use this to destroy her credibility. No, I said, we're going to do something better. What? We're going to let her destroy herself. That afternoon, I held a press conference. Not to defend myself. That would have looked defensive and guilty. Instead, I announced that Caltech Solutions was donating $5 million to establish a foundation for domestic misuse survivors. Violence against women is a serious issue that affects families across our community, I said, looking directly into the cameras. As someone who's been falsely accused of misuse, I understand how important it is that real victims are believed and supported. That's why I'm putting my money where my mouth is. The reporters ate it up. Here was a man so confident in his innocence that he was donating millions to fight the very crime he was accused of committing. After the press conference, I drove to the Velvet Tap, the upscale bar where Sienna had posted that first Instagram photo. I'd done my research. It was Damien's favorite hangout, and he'd be there tonight celebrating what he thought was his victory. I was right. He was holding court at a corner table, surrounded by sycophants and admirers, telling everyone who'd listen about how he'd rescued Sienna from her toxic marriage. I walked up to the table and smiled. Damien, fancy meeting you here. The conversation came to a sudden halt. Everyone stared at me like I was a ghost. Evan, Damien said carefully, I don't think you should be here. Why not? It's a public place. I'm allowed to have a drink, aren't I? I signaled the bartender and ordered a whiskey. The bar was completely silent, everyone straining to hear what would happen next. I saw your girlfriend on TV this morning, I said conversationally. Quite a performance. Sienna's a brave woman for speaking out. She certainly is something. I pulled out my phone. You know, I've been thinking about what she said, about how I threatened to end her. You did threaten her. Did I? That's interesting because I have recordings of every conversation that took place in my house for the last 6 months. Would you like to hear them? The color drained from his face. Or maybe you'd prefer to hear the recording I made of Sienna admitting that she made the whole thing up. I hit play. Sienna's voice filled the bar. I can't believe how easy this is. That reporter ate up every word. Evan's going to be destroyed. The silence that followed was deafening. You see, Damien, the thing about declaring war is that you better make sure you can win it. And you two amateurs just brought slingshots to a nuclear fight. I finished my whiskey and stood up. Oh, and you might want to check the news tomorrow. I think you'll find it very interesting. I walked out of the bar, leaving Damien and his friends in stunned silence. The next morning, every major news outlet in the city was playing the recording of Sienna admitting she'd lied about the misuse. Her credibility was destroyed, her reputation was in tatters, and the restraining order was dismissed. But I still wasn't done. The divorce proceedings were a brutal battle. With the recording of Sienna admitting to fraud, Richard was able to not only get her claims dismissed, but also file countersuits for defamation, extortion, and conspiracy. Damien, meanwhile, had been fired from Morrison and Associates and was facing criminal charges for corporate espionage. His wife had filed for divorce and taken their kids. His yacht had been repossessed, but Sienna wasn't going down without a fight. I want to meet, she said when she called me a week later. Just the two of us. No lawyers, no recordings, no games. Why would I agree to that? Because I have something you want. I doubt that. The original incorporation papers for Caltech. The real ones. My blood went cold. What are you talking about? The papers you filed 6 years ago? I may have made some modifications before you submitted them. Modifications that make me a founding partner. It was a bluff. It had to be, but if it wasn't, where do you want to meet? The house. Our house. One last time. I drove home with my stomach in knots. If Sienna had somehow forged the incorporation papers, if she really was listed as a founding partner, she could claim half of everything. All my preparations, all my evidence, all my carefully laid plans would be worthless. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch we'd picked out together 3 years ago. She looked smaller than I remembered, fragile in a way that had nothing to do with the fake vulnerabilities she'd displayed on TV. Hello, Evan. Sienna, let's get this over with. She pulled out a manila folder and set it on the coffee table. The incorporation papers. Take a look. I opened the folder with trembling hands. There they were. The original documents I'd filed to establish Caltech Solutions, and there, in black and white, was Sienna's name listed as co-founder and equal partner. My heart stopped. Then I looked closer. The signature was wrong. The date was wrong. The notary stamp was from a notary who hadn't been licensed until 2 years after I'd incorporated. This is a forgery, I said. Prove it. I don't have to. The state keeps copies of all incorporation filings. These don't match. Her face crumpled. I know. Then why? Because I wanted to see if there was any part of you that still cared about me. Any part that would be willing to share what we built together, even if you didn't have to. I stared at her. Are you serious? I loved you, Evan. I still love you. This whole thing with Damien, it was stupid. I was lonely and scared, and I made terrible choices, but I never stopped loving you. You tried to destroy me. I was angry. You shut me out of your life, out of your success. I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. So you decided to cheat on me and steal from me. I decided to fight for what I thought I deserved. But I was wrong about everything. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. I know you'll never forgive me. I know I've lost you forever. But I want you to know that everything I did because I felt like I was losing you anyway. That doesn't excuse what you did. No, it doesn't. Nothing excuses what I did. She turned back to me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in months. The woman I'd fallen in love with. I'm going to disappear, Evan. Leave the city. Start over somewhere else. I won't contest the divorce. Won't ask for anything. I just want it to be over. What about Damien? Damien was never about love. He was about revenge. Revenge against you for being everything he wasn't, and revenge against myself for not being everything I thought I should be. She picked up her purse and headed for the door. I'm sorry for all of it. You deserve better. Sienna, she stopped. Why did you really do it? The truth. She was quiet for a long moment. Because I was afraid that if I didn't take half of your success, I'd end up with none of it. And I was right, wasn't I? After she left, I sat in the empty house and thought about the last 6 years, about the dreams we'd shared, the plans we'd made, the life we'd built together, about how it had all crumbled because two people who'd once loved each other had forgotten how to talk to each other. But I wasn't feeling sorry for myself. I was feeling something else entirely, relief. The next morning, I drove to Damien's apartment building. He was loading boxes into a beat-up Honda Civic, a far cry from the Porsche he'd been driving a month ago. Moving day? I asked. He looked up startled. What do you want? Just to see how the other half lives. You got what you wanted? I lost my job, my wife, my kids, everything. Are you happy now? Actually, yeah, I am. He straightened up, some of his old arrogance returning. You think you won? You lost your wife, your marriage, your perfect life. You're just as alone as I am. The difference is, I chose to be alone. You had it chosen for you. She never loved you, not really. She told me you were boring, predictable, a meal ticket, nothing more. Maybe, but she didn't love you either. You were just revenge with good abs. He slammed the trunk of his car. You're a cold bastard, Evan. No, Damien, I'm just not stupid. I walked back to my car, leaving him to finish packing his pathetic life into boxes. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Sienna had moved to Portland and was working as a marketing coordinator for a small nonprofit. Damien had taken a job selling insurance in Phoenix. I'd heard through mutual friends that they'd tried to make it work for a while. But it turned out that relationships built on betrayal and greed don't have much staying power. I kept the house, the business, and my dignity. More importantly, I kept the lesson. Never trust anyone who says they deserve half of what you built when they contributed nothing to building it. As I sat in my office that final day, looking out at the city I'd conquered, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Evan Callahan. Mr. Callahan, this is Jennifer Walsh from Pacific Business Magazine. We're doing a feature on successful entrepreneurs who've overcome personal challenges. Would you be interested in an interview? I smiled. Actually, I think I would. The article ran 3 months later with the headline, Half is mine, but the rest is yours. How one CEO turned personal betrayal into professional triumph. It was a bestseller.